Color guard attached.
Audience, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Scout salute. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Color guard, post colors. Two. Audience may be seating. Scouts remain standing. Scouts, please join me in the scout oath. On my honor,
I will do my best to do my duty to God and my country, to obey scout law, to help other people at all times, to keep myself physically strong and to be awake and morally straight.
Law.
Scouts trust to be loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent.
Two. Scouts may be seated. Audience, color guard.
Welcome, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Earl, Scoutmaster, Troop 145. It is our distinct pleasure tonight to have a special guest. This doesn't happen every day that we get to honor an American hero. And I was wondering if Mr. Gray, the younger Mr. Gray, could come up and introduce his father. You might want to say something nice about him.
For those of you that don't know me, my name is Roger Gray. I am on the district committee with the Boy Scouts here in our local district. And I thought it would be nice for you guys to meet somebody special. I am the son, I am the proud son of a Tuskegee Airman, red-tail pilot. For those of you that don't know what red-tail pilots are or who the Tuskegee Airmen are, they were the black fighter pilots of World War II that flew first to North Africa, then out of Italy. But I don't know all the details, so I'm going to let my father give you all the details. And then after he talks a little bit, he talks longer if you raise your hand and ask questions. Okay, so it's going to be a little bit from him and then question and answer, and that'll keep it going. And then we have refreshments afterwards. So at this time, I'd like to ask my father, retired Lieutenant Colonel Leo Gray, to come up.
It's a pleasure to be here with everybody tonight. The other day, yesterday, I guess the day before yesterday, I was at the Boys and Girls Club down in Modesto. I'm just coming back from a Tuskegee Airmen convention in Las Vegas. I didn't leave all my money there. But yes, I was one of the Red Tail pilots. Have any of you seen the movie Red Tails?
Yes, I have.
Okay. Well, those of you that have the Blu-ray version of the DVD, there's a companion documentary titled Double Victory. And I and others of the original group were in the movie, in the documentary Double Victory. The movie Red Tails, they're a little too young for us. As a matter of fact, when I look at the guys that are in the movie, they were old for us back then. Because I was 20 when the war ended. And a lot of them were a lot older than 20. But anyhow, I'm from Boston originally. Matter of fact, I used to be a Boy Scout, and I was aspiring up the ladder, and I met all the qualifications for a Life Scout, but instead of waiting to get my badge, I had a girlfriend. And I said, uh-oh, goodbye Boy Scouts. and that was the story of my life, I guess, after that. But anyhow, from Boston, I graduated from Boston English High School in 1942. And I started working at the Boston Army Corp Vocation as a laborer. I was a strapping 133 pounds, and lifting 100-pound boxes was not my cup of tea. So I managed to get promoted to a tally clerk where I counted boxes. I ended up with German prisoners of war as my labor gangs. And we were loading 500, 1,000-pound bombs, mostly destined for England. From that point, from England, they knew where the bombs were going, and they didn't appreciate that fact. But anyhow, they were going to 8th Air Force in England for delivery to Germany. And fall of 42, one of the guys with whom I was carpooling said, "You ought to take the test to become an aviation cadet. That way you won't be drafted." I said, "Oh, yeah. You know, if you get drafted, you go where they send you." You know, back then, all the blacks were going into the Navy as stewards or into the Army with some menial task like lifting 100-pound boxes, cleaning trees, and all that kind of messy stuff. So I said, well, if I got to be an aviation cadet, maybe I'd be somebody. So I took the test in November, and I passed it. But I wasn't called to active duty until May 1943. As a matter of fact, Frank Roberts, who I was carpooling with, he was called in April. Well, he graduated in January 1944. I didn't graduate until August. Why the difference? He was the last one for cadets to go directly into the aviation cadet program. I had to go down to Keystone Field, Mississippi for 30 days of basic training as a private. Cadets got $75 a month, mind you, but I got $50 a month. And from there, we moved up to Tuskegee Institute, what they call a college training detachment. And they gave us classes in English, math, geography, history, American government, physics. Plus we got 10 hours of orientation, a J3 Piper Cub, and a lot of physical education, and physical fitness, and a lot of harassment, you know. But they kept us pretty busy. I went there from June until October. I went over to the air base classification, and there were about 70 in my class in classification, and we went to lower pre-flight. Rumors were that there'd be 23 single-engine grads. Well, 70 people, 23? I kept looking on either side of me to see who wasn't going to be there. I knew I was going to be there. But anyhow, this went on, and we went through pre-flight. We went back to the campus for primary training at Moulton Field, which is now a National Historic Site. If you're ever in Alabama, it's about 30 miles east of Montgomery. It's between Montgomery, Alabama, and Columbus, Georgia. It's right off of Highway 85. And it's now a National Historic Site. It's a very interesting experience if you ever get that way. But I did my primary training. I flew a Fairchild PT-19. It had a monoplane. Earlier, they had flown PT-17s, but from January to May, they had us flying the PT-19. Then they switched back, I think, to the PT-13 because in hot weather, the runway wasn't long enough for the PT-19 to safely get off. So, anyhow, when we completed our primary training, we had, when I was in college training detachment, yesterday, we got 10 hours in J3 Piper Cub. Funny thing, I was one of the first ones to go up, and my flight instructor showed up, and he was hanging on the wing, you know, and I told some of the guys, you guys go ahead, I'll wait later. No. He kept pushing me up, so I had to go up with him. Well, I thought he was a little inebriated. But anyhow, we got up and got back down, and I'll tell you more about him later. And so anyhow, when I got through, we went back to basic training, and in basic we had instrument flying and a lot of cross-country stuff. Then when we moved to advanced training in the Texan AT-6, we had retractable landing gear, we got a lot of navigation and formation flying. Well, I graduated August 4th, 1944, was a second lieutenant, United States Army Air Force. And we got 10 hours of orientation in the Tuskegee at P40 Aug. Used to call it the flying coffin, killed so many people. The guys were afraid to fly it. And our planes were not the best. They used to say we had airplanes with a flying tiger vintage. They were coming apart. My class, gee, one guy came down and he tried to land and one wheel wouldn't come down, so he had to land on one wheel. And when he crashed, finally, his head bumped into the crash panel, and they said he had a concussion in the brain, and they gave him a medical discharge. And he got out and went to law school. So then another one came down, and he landed, and they had two little toggle switches, one for the wheels and one for the flaps. They don't go like it. And so he was getting ready to turn off the runway, and he hit the toggle switch for the wheels. Well, the flaps were still up, and when he got ready to turn off the runway, his wheels collapsed. And then it was my turn. I got ready to take off. They give us a lot of physical fitness and try to strengthen your legs. They always used to say, we want you to have strong legs to fight that torque, the T-40. So I started down the runway. You had to have 80 miles an hour to get the aircraft off the ground. I got it up to 75, and my rudder, I couldn't hold it with my right foot. It kept going back and forth like this. So I put my left foot over there trying to hold it with 2 feet. And both feet were bouncing back and forth. And it started moving veering to the left. And at 75 miles an hour, I decided I better chop the throttle. And it came to a stop. By the time the plane stopped rolling, all the rescue people were there screaming for me to get out the airplane. I didn't rush, but I didn't know what was going on. So I got out, they put me in an ambulance and taken me back up to the hospital to find out that I was okay. And as we were going across the field, I said, hey, somebody lost a wheel. I said, yeah, that's yours. What happened, when the torque hit my right wheel, it snapped off. Well, the tower never told me. I'm trying to get the dumb airplane off the ground. If I had gotten it off the ground, I might not have been here today, you know. But anyhow, when we finished our 10 hours in the Cub, in the P40, we went down to Eglet Field for gunnery training. And it was not very good down there. Times back then were different than they are now. It was total segregation. And we couldn't go to the theater. We couldn't go to the officers' club. We couldn't go to the PX unless we got something to take out. There were prisoners of war roaming the base freely, going to the officers' club, eating in the post exchange and everything. But all we could do was get some beverages to take back to BOQ to sip on while we were in between flights. But we got through that situation, got back to Tuskegee, and incidentally I saw some white officers sitting on the steps of base exchange eating their brown bag lunch. I said, why don't you go inside? I said, in August, in Alabama, it's hot. Now you know how it gets out here, it's hot. Oh, it's against the law in Alabama for whites and blacks to eat under the same roof. I said, be my guest. So, what had happened, incidentally, in July, the War Department had issued a directive that there'd be no more segregation on military bases. Colonel Noel Parrish, who was a base commander at Tuskegee, was the only base commander, I guess, in the armed forces that adhered to that law. And so he opened up everything, the theater, the post exchange, the officers' mess, everything was open to all officers from then on. So when we finished our combat training, and transition in the P40, we moved on to Walterboro, South Carolina to get our combat training in P-47 Thunderbolt. When we got to Walterboro, they hadn't learned about the new War Department directive. So we took all the signs off the buses for colored only. We sat in the theater wherever we wanted to. We went to both base exchange, the officers' club and everything. And it was kind of a lot of disruption on the base at that time. But things worked their way out. And I got my combat training in the P-47. That was an experience flying those things because they weren't very good either. I had some pretty sad experiences with several of those aircraft, but I managed to survive. One time I was coming down, my plane was on fire, and I landed, and they screamed for me to get out the airplane on the runway. So I got out the runway, chopped my throttle, and when I got out the airplane, it started taking off down the runway, nobody in it. And it hit retro base headquarters, but fortunately it ran off the runway into a revetment and nobody got hurt. But one of the classes that left when I got there, it was class 44D, they would truck us from Walterboro to Yemassee, which was near Beaufort, South Carolina, where Paris Island, the Marine pilots were flying Corsairs out of Paris Island. We used to dogfight with them with our P-47s. But we caught the train from Yemassee up to Hampton Roads, where we ship out overseas. Well, this class 44D got to Yemassee, and they were waiting for the train. Somebody saw across the street, like from here out to the end of the room, there was a convenience store. I said, well, let's go get some sodas. You know, and I said, looking, walked in the store. And the proprietor saw these guys. Well, what happened when they left Walterboro? Each man was issued a .45 pistol and 2 clips of ammunition because you're going to war. And you got to be able to defend yourself in case you encounter the enemy. Well, they walked into the store, and the proprietor pulled a gun and said, I don't serve no niggers in here. So we said, which one of us are you going to shoot? Everybody pulled out the gun. So people found out what was going on. Cars started pulling up all around the store. They're getting ready to have a pitched battle. The provost marshal in the meantime saw what was going on. The train had pulled in. He got the guys out of the store, on the train, and out of Yemassee. Word got back to Walterboro. What had happened? Yemassee? Where's that? So everybody started looking on the map to find out where Yemassee was. Well, the P-47 had 8 50 caliber machine guns. And we were there to learn how to fly combat. And we were doing gunnery missions, all this and the other thing. Let's go find Yemassee. We started making these passes on Yemassee, and people were scared to death. They didn't know whether somebody's going to open fire or not. But we didn't have any more trouble in Yemassee. But anyhow, my class was fortunate enough to get shipped out before Christmas. December 24th, they left Hampton Roads en route to Italy. I didn't get to go. They kept 4 of us back. Poor us. We had to stay back for two months. Missed out on combat. Gosh, that was a terrible We had a ball. We had two of the guys were married, and another fellow and myself, we were single. So we let the married guys fly on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. We flew Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Worked out pretty well. But they couldn't go anywhere with their wives. So it worked out great for us. But anyhow, I left Walterboro and headed to combat March 1st. And we arrived in Naples March 12th. And we went to the replacement depot in Caserta, Italy. Then we moved up to our base. But when we got a Navy transport ship, and there were 15 of us, and there were 15 replacement pilots for Black Widow and Night Fighter Group. And we got to sleep in the officers' quarters, nice quarters on the upper deck. But these night fighter guys all had to sleep in the hold. That's one time they paid to be black. They didn't want us in the hold with all those white troops, because you couldn't have blacks in a position superior to whites back in those days. So they let the white officers sleep down there, and we slept up in the nice officers' quarters. But they let them eat up with us. But I arrived, I'll say March 14th, and I was assigned to the 100th Fighter Squadron. And I took the plane that Major Bill Madison had. He moved up to headquarters as a group operations. And so my plane, he was the operations officer for the squadron, so his plane was number 2, so I had a low number aircraft. There's a fellow, Spurgeon Ellington, had completed his tour of duty, and they told him to take me up on an orientation flight. I thought I was a pretty hot pilot, so I wasn't gonna let him do anything that I couldn't do. He's not gonna get any lower than me, that's for sure. So we came over the base and we had to lift our wings so they wouldn't hit any of the airplanes off the ground. Then we came back, we did rolls over the field on the deck. I came home, came back to my revetment, my troop chief said, "You're in trouble." I said, "In trouble? What did I do?" "You're not supposed to do a roll unless you score a victory." I said, "Oh, Colonel Davis wants to see you and Lieutenant Ellington." Whew. We went to see Colonel Davis, and he went up one side and down the other. He fined Lieutenant Ellington a month's flight pay, $125, and he put me on probation. But you know, the guy died and never took me off probation. but anyhow, my first mission was to have been to Berlin, and that was a historic mission, 1,600 miles. And as a matter of fact, before we went on that mission, normally we were flying with 75-gallon wing tanks. But for that particular mission, we had to get big 110-gallon wing tanks. We didn't have enough on the base. So they had to go down to Folger, which the Folger basic area is where all 15th Air Force was. And the guys went down there, they were having a hard time getting these tanks. So someone said, "I saw someone on a train siding." So they went over, found the train siding, held up the train, took the tanks off the train, brought them back to our base. Well, these tanks were destined for a P-47 group. Well, you know, P-47 was a much bigger airplane than the P-51. So our ground support people had to stay up all night trying to retrofit these tanks to fit the P-51s and release, if necessary, if we got in combat. The next morning, we launched 59 aircraft. And one plane aborted shortly after takeoff. But then they headed out, and before we got to the IP point, there was a 52nd Fighter Group was supposed to relieve us. We were supposed to have target cover. The movie covered this. We were supposed to have target penetration, and they would have target cover. They didn't show up. So since we had the big tanks, the guy said, "Stay with them." So we stayed with the bombers and went over Berlin. And gosh, all hell broke out. Someone said that's a bad word, but that's what happened. And we ended up, one of our squadron leaders, the 301st, was shot down by an ME 262. And I think it was a 262. I saw someone said it was a 163, but I was told, a rocket plane, but I was told it was a jet. Anyhow, but the 99th Fighter Squadron managed to damage 3 of the jets. And my squadron, the 100th, destroyed 3 of the jets and probably destroyed 2 others and probably destroyed an NE-163 rocket plane. You never hear anything about the probables. All they talk about is destroyed or damaged. Well, probable, if you're a fighter pilot, that's a pretty significant effort. The problem is, you think you got it. You don't have verification from an eyewitness or camera gunnery. Well, the plane goes down and back, and you don't know where it is. You know, if no one saw it, but if you saw it going down and you know it couldn't get back up, you claim it as a problem. But anyhow, we managed to get away from that mission and come back. We lost 5 men on that trip. 2 of them landed behind Russian lines. We said if the planes had trouble, land behind the Russian lines in Berlin, outside of Berlin. So one of them, Flight Officer Spears, who lived out here in the Bay Area, he died last year, I think 2 years ago. And another one, Mitchell. Spears crash landed his plane on a field over which the Germans and Russians were engaged in combat. And the Germans captured him, and he was liberated 3 days later, so he never got into the POW system. And the Russians later reunited him with his buddy. They got back to our group after the war was over. 2 other of my classmates and squadron mates in the 100th, Lieutenants Reeves and Robinson, were heard calling into a radio tower in Rimini, up in northern Italy. "There's a field, let's go have a look." No trace was ever found of either plane or either man. Never found out what happened to them until last year. I was at a Tuskegee Airmen convention, and you know, they've got this great big graves program going on, trying to find lost POWs and so forth. They found them. Lieutenant Reeves was buried in Rome, Lieutenant Bob Robinson was interred in Arlington Cemetery this past October. What a relief that was to find out that at least their bodies were found. I had been worried all this time, what happened? But, you know, that was an incident. I had an interesting, the following week, that was March 24th, 1945. The following weekend, March 31st and April 1st, in missions, strafing missions over Romania, they managed to destroy 25 planes. In 2 days, we lost 4. That wasn't bad. On April 1st, the same day, I ended up on a mission going to Prague, escorting a P-38 photo reconnaissance plane. Interestingly enough, in 2008, I was at a meeting of the Air Force Association Council in Broward County. They had a guest speaker. And he says, Leo, were you ever around telling, this is before his talk. I said, yes. He says, do you remember a mission with 3 P-51s and a P-38? I said, we had a lot of those. I was on one where we encountered some jets. He said, you were? I said, yeah. Oh, I was the P-38 pilot. You were? I said, yeah. Well, I talked about you like a dog. What happened? We had 75-gallon tanks. And Prague was just a little way below Berlin. And so we got up to Prague, everything was quiet. And, you know, uneventful, but he was very talkative. And so we got to Prague, and he said, let's go a little further. We said, well, we're supposed to go back just a little bit further. We said, okay. So we went a little bit further. About 5 minutes later, we said, well, you ready to go back? No, just a little bit further. Okay. So then about 5 minutes later, we figured, we're going to run out of fuel. We only got 75 gallons. Why should we lose 3 P-51 so he can get some photographs? You know, it doesn't make sense. If you want to keep on going, you're on your own. So someone said, bogey, 12 o'clock high, and the 2 German jets coming after us. I guess he wondered, my gosh, these 3 black guys escorting me and the 2 German jets, what am I going to do? So get in the number 2 slot, keep quiet. He got in the number 2 slot, we didn't hear another peep out of him. And we were going as fast as we could, about 350 miles an hour. And these jets came over, they were 100 miles an hour faster than us. And so they were flying about 5,000 feet, they were flying rings around us. So there's circles. I said, oh my gosh, I thought we had the best airplane in the sky. Look what's happening. So then it came down to about 1,200 feet. I could see the guys in the plane. And then they come and they approach to attack us. Well, that's okay. But as they came in, we figured we had a chance to shoot them down. Because we just do a scissors maneuver like that. See, they're faster than us. They'd shoot right by, but by the time we get back, we'd be on their tail, have a chance to shoot them down. We dropped our tanks. We dropped our tanks, they broke off. I guess they remembered Berlin. Because the fighting squadrons, the ones that knocked down all their airplanes. See, we had red tails. There were 4 P-51 groups in the 15th Air Force. The 31st group had candy stripe tails, with red stripes on the tail. The 52nd fighter group had yellow tails. And the 325th fighter group had black and yellow checkerboard tails, and we had red tails. Within each group, you could differentiate the squadron by the trim tabs. There's a little trim in the back. The 99th had blue trim tabs. We had 100th had black trim tabs. The 301st had white, and the 302nd had yellow. Well, the 302nd was deactivated before I got there. As a matter of fact, I got there March 14th, and the last of the 302nd pilots left March 12th. So we were back down to 3 squadrons. But we got back, Colonel Davis was about to court-martial Omar Blair, who was the captain that went and got these tanks. And they got word that the president's going to get the presidential unit citation. Well, he's going to kind of foolish trying to court-martial a guy for doing something that cost us to get a presidential unit citation. You know, in another case, he was, one of our guys was celebrating his 18th birthday. 18th birthday? The guy lied. Court-martialing. He lied about his age. Colonel Davis, how are you going to explain the fact that the man flew 2 combat missions before he was 18 years old? Okay, we'll ground him until he's 18. But anyhow, we had some interesting experiences. And I don't think we could go on, but when the war ended, because you probably heard about the Freeman Field Mutiny, and back here in the States, we had some twin-engine groups flying B-25s, and they were Freeman Field, Seymour, Indiana, and 101 officers were placed under house arrest. 3 of them were court-martialed, 1 was convicted. Their crime was trying to enter a white officers club. When word got back to Washington about what happened, all hell broke loose. The base commander was relieved of his command, the Air Force commander was relieved of his command, and everything was in topsy-turvy. The war in Europe ended shortly thereafter, and Colonel Davis, our commander, was sent back to take command of that unit, and they were slated to go to the Pacific in October. And the pilots of the 99th Squadron who were overseas were deactivated and sent back to the States. So they had a 99th Fighter Squadron at Lockwood Air Force Base, and they had another 99th Fighter Squadron at Catalonia, Italy. Wait a minute, come on, give me a break. But eventually they got that squared away because it was in the state of transition that it took place. But the 100th and 301st Fighter Squadrons, we thought we were going to go directly to the Pacific to join the composite group. But the war ended in Japan, so we just had a great time in Italy. But then we came back to the States, and we went to the replacement depot in Greensboro, North Carolina. And while there, we were there for 2 weeks. And I met a young lady several years later, said she was a physics instructor at Bennett College in Greensboro. And she said she was there 6 years. And no time in the 6 years came close to the 2 weeks. There were 52 of us at the replacement depot, from first lieutenant to lieutenant colonel. Nothing came close to the 2 weeks that you guys were there. The president was so glad to see you leave, he got his secretary back. We used to take the girls out to the officers club and so forth. There was nowhere for blacks to go in Greensboro, you know. And then everything was segregated to go out to the officers club. It was great. But anyhow, we had quite an experience. And I went back to Tuskegee for assignment, nothing to do. I was, in essence, the base inventory officer. I didn't have a permanent assignment. And then later I was moved up to Lockwood Air Force Base. Initially I was assigned to the 617th Medium Bombardment Squadron, and I was a co-pilot for Leslie Williams, who, his wife lives somewhere near Modesto. He died not long ago. And then I was transferred back into the 99th Fighter Squadron, where I was assigned when I was separated from active duty, and I spent the rest of the time in reserve, total of 41 years, before I retired in 1984. And I was commander of a research and development flight down here at Berkeley, and we met jointly with the Naval Research and Development Company at the University of California. So it was a great incident. One day, while I got a call from the president's office asking me to cancel my meeting because the students had taken over the campus. This was in 1972, I think it was, 71, 72. And you know, there was a lot of unrest in Berkeley at that time. And the students had taken over the campus, including the president's office. And the only thing scheduled at the University of California that day was my meeting at the Lawrence Radiation Lab. And I said, if you don't cancel your meeting, you might blow the lid off of this campus. I said, by all means, we'll cancel it. And so I called the commanding general of the Western Air Reserve Region and told him that asked for permission to attend meetings at civilian clothes thereafter because our lives were in danger on the Berkeley campus. He said, well, go someplace else. No, we had to meet with the Navy company, and they were civilian clothes, so we were the only unit in the Air Force authorized to wear civilian clothes to meetings. So that was the end of my military career. When I got out of the military, incidentally, when I went in, I just finished high school, you know, and I couldn't qualify for anything because you had to have at least a year of college, no matter what you wanted to do. I didn't want to go to jet school. I had time in fighters, but I only had a high school education. You had to have at least a year of college. So I went back to school. I took some refresher courses in high school, and I matriculated at the University of Massachusetts in June of 1947 and graduated in June of 50. And then I went out to the University of Nebraska and got a master's degree. And The rest is quite a history. I ended up first at the University of Massachusetts Agricultural Extension Service, then down in Washington, University, U.S. Department of Agriculture. I was doing poultry marketing research, and I was involved in a lot of environmental protection agency type stuff before it was environmental protection, but it was EPA oriented, and it was a sort of a earth-shaking or groundbreaking research in the poultry industry, and I had several other things. As a matter of fact, when the Who's Who came up with a publication in 2008 titled 101 Industry Experts, and they had me listed, about 4 pages written up about me. So while I didn't have much of a military career, I had a little career outside. So I don't know, anybody got a question? Jesse?
I have to disagree with much of the military service. I think you're,
Say what?
I say thank you to you for your service.
Oh, thank you, sir. Thank you. Yes, sir.
What's it like to fly a P51 Mustang?
Oh.
Have you ever been to heaven?
That sounds good.
No, it's a great airplane. Unfortunately, sometimes you get a little carried away. And so I lost a wingman one time. We were coming around we wanted to do some vertical rolls, and we would dive and do some vertical rolls coming up over the field. And he was pulling up tighter than me. His plane was like this. I said, "You're pulling up too tight. Ease off the stick." He said, "Oh, I'm okay." As soon as he said that, his right wing snapped off. And I looked at my airspeed indicator. It was doing about 750 miles an hour. That was too fast for the airplane. And but I managed to pull it out on 1,000 feet and took a little starch out of me. But it's a very easy aircraft to fly, very comfortable. And yes, sir.
You mentioned that you did some dogfight training flying a P-47 versus
Yes.
Corsair.
Yeah.
And P-47 being a much bigger plane. How'd that work out?
Well, they used to jump us when we took off. And we couldn't do anything but mush around the sky. They had electric flaps, but we had hydraulic flaps. And our planes just mushed. But if we got them over 12,000 feet, it was a different story. We could take care of them up there, but we couldn't do anything with them down at low altitude. The later P-47 models and the end model, the bubble canopy, they had electric flaps. They were, that was an awesome airplane. Awesome. Only trouble with P-47, it was so big, it couldn't go very far. The reason why they switched to P-51 to begin with, the P-47s could only go so far with the bombers, and then they had to turn back. Well, the Germans knew that. They'd wait until the P-47s turned back, then they'd hit the bombers. But with the P-51, not so. P-51s went all the way. The P-51s, someone said, one no more. Yes, sir.
What was the one German fighter that you would fear more than any other?
Well, I never encountered it. Only plane I encountered was the ME-262. They were 100 miles an hour faster than we were. But otherwise, it was a pilot against pilot. They had ME-109s, the Focke-Wulf 190s shot down our planes, and we shot them down, and the P-51 was a better airplane. But basically, it was who the pilot was, and but they had good airplanes. Yeah, they were good airplanes. Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
In the movie, they made a pretty significant point that the bomber pilots weren't too happy about having you at first. But after you proved yourself, they were requesting you. Was that a pretty accurate piece of the movie?
Yeah, that's right. They requested us on that Berlin mission because they felt more secure. So what happened, the other fighter pilots, the groups, they would escort the bombers, and if they saw some enemy fighters, they'd take off and leave them. And the bombers were left exposed, and the enemies would have some other planes come in and attack the bombers. Well, the bombers were pretty well mincemeat as far as these fighters were concerned, and they're pretty easy to shoot down. But Colonel Davis was our commander, said if you leave the bombers, you'll be court-martialed. And so it's easier to stick with the bombers than to try to deal with him. He was a rough customer.
Do you do any flying today?
No, last time I was on an airplane was when the Red Tail movie came out. The Collins Foundation flies B-17, B-24, and P51 all over the country. And they asked me to come up to Stewart to help fly the P51 down to Boca Raton. I said, okay. So I went up to Stewart, and I got in the airplane and flew it down. I didn't take off and land, because in the back seat you couldn't see, but I flew the aircraft the whole way. We were flight escort was the other aircraft. When the plane landed, what happened, the newspaper in Fort Lauderdale had a 2-page article, front page, second page, full about me. And that I'm going to escort these bombers down to Stewart. So everybody was out at the airport to see the Red Tail pilot escort these bombers back. Well, we got to the airport, and the pilot got out the airplane. Nobody got out the back seat. That was me. I'm sitting back there trying to figure out how am I going to get out. And I said, gee, when you're 20 years old, you just pop up. When you're 88, you don't quite do it the same way. And I finally managed to pull onto the bar up the top and pull myself out. And I got out of the airplane. It came back, and I said, oh my gosh. The airport manager said she'd never seen so many people, but they were all out there to see me. I said, I don't think I want to fly anymore. It's too much trouble getting in and out, you know. And, but it's a lot of fun. I joined the Quiet Birdman, which was, I don't know if anybody's ever heard of it. It's an organization, ancient organization of pilots that seasoned people have to get in. And so we did one. Yes, sir.
How many missions did you fly?
Huh? I had 15 combat missions, yeah. As a matter of fact, I flew the last mission of the war. The official documents will say that the 332nd flew its last mission on April 30th or so. They have 311 missions. I say we had 312. But I got credit for missions that I flew March 7th, the day the armistice was signed. We had to fly through the Brenner Pass and over Lynn's Airdrome to see if anybody shoot at us. And believe me, when we went through the Brenner Pass, we were low. Because we didn't want to get high, get anybody a chance to see us. Because if they wanted to shoot at us, they could see us to shoot. But if we stayed low, they couldn't see us. By the time they saw us, we were gone. And then we went over Lynn's Airdrome. Lynn's Airdrome in Austria, that's where they had a lot of dogfights in that area. And you see planes scattered all over the place. The runway was full of potholes, but beside the runway was a beautiful grass green strip where they used for takeoff and landing. And inside the mountain, the doors were open. And inside those doors were a lot of airplanes. That's where they kept the airplanes, inside the mountain. The planes are outside, they're just there for us as decoys. And but we went back, and I got credit for that mission. And if I got credit as a combat mission on May 7th, that meant that there were 312 rather than 311 combat missions flown by the 332nd Fighter Group. That's some hands moving up and down, and yes, sir.
Another question. You obviously, your unit, the Red Tails, serve our country in incredible ways. And I'm wondering, how did it feel after doing what you did to come home to the same old thing?
Well, a lot of people have the opinion that none of the 3 Red Tail pilots were welcomed back to the States. A lot of the guys that came back early came back as individuals, or a few at a time. And nobody would go out to put out a big reception for a handful of people. But I came back, we left Naples October 1st on the Levi Woodbury Liberty ship. The whole 332nd Fighter Group, 100th, 301st, and Headquarters Squadron, and all of the remnants of people who were supporting us. We came back on one ship. When we pulled into New York Harbor, they had a boatload of women come out there to greet us. Boy, they were young and trying to get on our boat, but you know, they kept it a little too far away. We landed at the port in New Jersey, We had entertainers on shore to welcome us back. As a matter of fact, Josh White, who was a famous entertainer, came on board, and he was up with me and a couple other guys from the 100th Fighter Squadron. We were the last ones to disembark. And we had a great time, and he invited us to come up to see him. He was playing at the Cafe Society Uptown. And so we were not supposed to leave the base. And but a couple of other fellows and myself, we went, there was a hole in the fence across from the Provost Marshal's office. So we stood in this long line to crawl through that hole. And we went to Cafe Society Uptown to see him. Well, as a matter of fact, one of the fellows, Calvin Span, said, I got 3 sisters, we can bring them. Well, we didn't think, you know, we said, okay. We got to Cafe Society, we were ready to leave. They said, I don't think you guys want to leave. You got over $40 worth of drinks you haven't used. $40 worth of drinks. The cover charge. We didn't know anything about the cover charge. Yeah, we're stuck with these 3 women. $40? That's a lot of money back in 1945. So we had to stay at the Cafe Society Uptown, but we had a great time. But it was quite an interesting experience. But we had a royal welcome when we got back. But we were the only one of the Red Tail pilots that did. But the others didn't come back as part of the group. I had one experience. I said, we had a lot of racial experiences. I had one. I was lying in my bed, and Captain Curtis said, hey, grab a toothbrush. Let's go on down to Mobile. I said, oh, yeah, I got to take a captain down there for the Mardi Gras parade. She had the black troops from Brooks Air Force Base were going to be in the parade, and they wanted the black officers to lead them. Well, all the black officers were at Tuskegee. They didn't want any black officers at any other bases because the white enlisted men would have to salute them. And so they took an officer from Tuskegee to lead these troops in the parade. I got down to Mobile, and hey, they zipped up the sidewalks at 5 o'clock. So I said, going down to New Orleans. I said, okay. I'm not leave or anything like that. I just jumped on the train, went on down to New Orleans. And couldn't find a hotel room. Didn't know where I was going. So someone said, hey, there's a club out in Gentilly. We're going out there. One young lady from the base said, I'll take you out there. So, okay. I got out to Gentilly, and it turned out the club manager, his cousin was the intelligence officer for our group. So he said, I have an extra bunk outside. So I went and slept in his bunk. And he had this great big collie dog, it was about this big. Every time I get to move, he'd growl. And so, I didn't move all night long. But the next day, we got on the bus to come back into New Orleans. And when we got on the bus, we sat in the 3rd seat, blacks loaded from the rear to the front. Those of you from, this is California, you didn't do it. But the blacks were loaded from the rear to the front. And so we were sitting on the 3rd seat. And the bus kept stopping and starting and stopping and starting. And we didn't move, we were just busy running our mouths. So somebody tapped me on the shoulder and said, did you hear what I said? I said, beg your pardon? I said, get up and move down the back of the bus. I laughed at him. Some scrawny white guy standing up there with his girlfriend telling me to get up and move down the back of the bus. Who did he think he was, And so he started calling me one of Roosevelt's boys. He said, before you get off of this bus, you can add another battle star to your ribbons. And he put his hand on the seat in front of me, getting ready to hit me. And I had I used to carry medicine in brown bags. I ain't even old enough, that. So I wrapped my hand around my medicine bottle, getting ready to reciprocate. And in the meantime, the bus driver showed up and said, hey, what's going on here? I said, oh, nothing. And so he said, you boys want to move down the back of the bus? I looked around the whole back. It's a great big bus. There was one black lady way back in the back seat. I said, oh my God, we laughed. So we got up and moved on down to the back. So we got to a transfer point. And this fool had the gall to put his hand on the rail before we get off the bus so that we couldn't get off in front of any of the white people. This lady was sitting back there. She was one of these 5x5 sisters. She said, boy, I've been watching you, listen to you run out of the mouth ever since you got in this bus. She opened up her purse. She said, if you don't get out of my way, she put her hand in the purse, and that guy left the bus, he didn't touch a step. I said, oh, what a brave man he is. I mean, here I was, a combat veteran, so highly decorated, you know, with all my ribbons and everything. In this pool, acting like that. But that's what we had to contend with. That was just a tip of the iceberg. It was like that all over. And no respect whatsoever for us, but we managed to persevere. I'll tell you one thing for the, speaking of perseverance, you guys ever hear of the 5 Ps? I'll tell you about it. Number 1 P is perceive, if you want to do something. You have an idea that you want to do something? Something, a great idea you want to... Okay, you got an idea you want to do something. What are you going to do about it? You have to plan to put it into effect. You perceive first, and then you plan to put it into effect. Once you make a plan to put it in effect, then you have to prepare, right? So how are you going to go about doing it? Then as you get your preparation done, you got to produce. That's where it starts getting tough. You got to produce. And then the production process, things get tough. It gets tough. And sometimes you might want to quit. But that's where the last P comes in. Persevere. Persevere to get the job done. The Tuskegee Airman story is a classic example of overcoming adversity because of perseverance. There was a fellow from Hiram College in Ohio. He uses the Tuskegee Airman story as a role model for everyone in the country, black, white, green, yellow, you name it. He said, that is a story of success and fortitude that everybody should listen to. Not because they were black, but because of what they accomplished. They said we couldn't do it, but we did.